You'd think getting abducted by aliens would be the worst day of your life. Turns out it was just the beginning of a very complicated relationship. The first time I met Captain Draven, he was pointing a plasma gun at my head. I was still in my pajamas. "Identify your species," he said, voice low and sharp, like it had been forged in war. Homo sapiens? Preferably not shot." I answered, trying not to pee myself. That's how my abduction began, not with bright lights or screaming probes, but with awkward eye contact and a man who looked too human to be real. Tall, lean, his skin faintly luminescent under the blue light of the ship. Silver hair, glacier eyes, and an aura that screamed command. He was the kind of man you wouldn't dare touch unless you had a death wish. The kind of man I'd later learn to read like a book. They called themselves the Zenith Fleet, an elite interstellar crew collecting psychological samples from Earth. Apparently, my file said I was a trauma therapist, which, in their twisted logic, made me valuable. I was assigned to observe their emotional patterns. Instead, I ended up observing Kale obsessively. The captain never smiled, never flinched, never slept, at least not when anyone was watching. He gave orders like a machine, moved like one, too. And yet, sometimes, when the stars reflected off the glass and he thought no one was watching, he'd look almost human. One night, curiosity outweighed fear. I approached him on the bridge. "You ever sleep?" I asked, arms crossed, pretending I wasn't trembling. He didn't look at me. "Humans require excessive rest. We don't. Right?" I muttered. "And emotional suppression works great until it doesn't." That made him glance at me the first time I saw emotion crack his icy mask. Just a flicker. "What do you know of suppression, Earthborn?" I smiled faintly. "Enough to know you're doing it perfectly." He stared at me for a long, unbearable silence. Then he walked away. But after that night, he started showing up in the med bay, the observation deck, even the cafeteria. Always when no one else was around. Always near me. Weeks passed. I'd learned their customs, their language, even the subtle hum their ship made when it dreamed. But Kale remained a riddle, brilliant, broken, beautiful in a way that scared me. One evening, while reviewing emotional data, I noticed a pattern. Kale's neural stress spikes whenever I'm present. I told myself it was irritation, but my heart said otherwise. So I confronted him again. "Captain, do you hate me?" He turned slowly, eyes like silver knives. "Why would you assume that?" "Because every time I talk, your heart rate jumps." He froze. "You've been monitoring me." "I'm your therapist," I said softly. "That's my job." His voice dropped an octave. "And if I told you it wasn't hate?" My chest tightened. "Then what is it?" He didn't answer. Just stepped closer, close enough for me to see the faint scar along his jaw, the way his lips parted like he was holding something back. But he didn't kiss me. Not yet. The tension became unbearable after that. During missions, he'd bark orders at the crew, then find me after, asking subtle, personal questions. About fear. About attachment. About love. Once, I caught him staring at my hands as I fixed a data console. His expression was unreadable. "You humans," he murmured. "You touch everything as if it will disappear. Maybe we're just afraid it will." He looked away, but his hand brushed mine when he passed the tool back. Just a graze, fleeting as a star's breath. Still, my heart almost stopped. Then came the raid. The ship was ambushed by mercenaries from a rival faction. Explosions shook the corridors, alarms blaring like screams. I was thrown against the wall, bleeding. Kale found me amid the chaos. "You're hurt," he said, voice trembling, actually trembling. "I'll live," I gasped. "You need to." Before I could finish, he pulled me behind him, firing at the attackers with deadly precision. His body shielded mine completely. After the last mercenary fell, silence swallowed the ship. Kale turned to me, his face pale, eyes burning. "Why didn't you hide?" he demanded. "Because I didn't want to lose you." For a moment, the world stopped spinning. His lips parted, his breath shaky. "You don't even belong to this world," he whispered. "Why would you risk your life for me?" "Because you saved mine. Over and over." Something in him broke then the cold armor, the commander's facade. He cupped my face, fingers trembling. "You shouldn't feel this," he said, voice breaking. "Neither should you," I whispered back. And then, finally, he kissed me. It wasn't gentle. It was raw. Desperate, a collision of two lonely souls who'd both forgotten what warmth felt like. The ship around us flickered with red lights, alarms still wailing, but I only felt his heartbeat against mine. After the battle, things changed. Cale didn't speak of the kiss. Neither did I. But the air between us became electric, every glance charged, every silence screaming. At night, I'd catch him standing outside my quarters, as if guarding me. Sometimes, he'd leave small things at my door, a data chip with music from his planet, or a folded cloth from his old uniform. Little offerings from a man who didn't know how to say, "I care." One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I stepped out and said, "If you're going to stand there every night, at least come in." He hesitated, then did. The room felt too small for both of us. He sat stiffly on the edge of the bed, while I poured 2 cups of something that passed for tea in space. "I don't understand you," he murmured finally. "Good," I said, smiling weakly. "Maybe that's why it works." He looked at me then, eyes softer than I'd ever seen. "You make me feel. That's kind of the point of therapy." His lips curved, barely a smile but enough to make my chest ache. Then he whispered, "Stay." And I did. Days turned into weeks, and I became something between a therapist and a secret. He'd call me into his quarters late at night to talk, but talking turned into sitting too close, into holding his hand when he thought no one would notice. He told me about his past, the wars he fought, the lives he lost, the guilt he carried. I listened, always, because underneath that cold exterior was a man drowning quietly. "You think I'm strong," he said once, staring at the stars. "But I'm not. Every command I give costs me a piece of myself." I reached for his hand. "Then let me help you carry it." He didn't answer, but he didn't pull away either. The crew began to notice. Whispers spread. A human and their captain impossible, forbidden. Cale tried to distance himself. Became cold again, formal, untouchable. It broke me. So one night, I confronted him on the bridge, in front of the stars. "If you're going to push me away," I said, voice shaking, "at least tell me why." His jaw clenched. "Because this can't exist. Not here. Not between us." "Then say you don't feel it." He looked at me, eyes burning. "You know I can't." "Then stop pretending." Silence. Only the hum of the ship between us. Then he whispered, almost pleading, "You'll get yourself killed for me. Then let me die knowing I wasn't afraid to love you." That was the night he broke rank, rules, and reason. He crossed the room, grabbed me by the collar, and kissed me like the universe had ended and I was the only thing left to hold on to. When he pulled away, he was trembling. "I would destroy entire worlds to keep you safe," he said. I smiled through tears. "Then maybe you should start by saving yourself." The days after that kiss felt like walking on the edge of a knife. Cale became someone else, gentler when it was just us, distant when others were near. His eyes lingered too long. His voice softened only when he said my name. But he never said what we both knew, that the line between captain and captive had vanished the moment his lips touched mine. And yet, every day, that same line threatened to slice us apart. One evening, during a hyperspace jump, the ship's energy grid faltered. I was in the lab, reviewing emotional response data from the crew when alarms blared. The lights flickered to red, the air shivering with static. Cale's voice echoed through the comms. "All hands to emergency stations." I rushed out into the corridor only to find him there, blocking my path. His uniform was half unzipped, his hair damp with sweat. He looked more human than ever. "You shouldn't be here," he said, grabbing my wrist. "I'm not hiding," I shot back. "What's happening?" "Energy disruption. Possibly sabotage." "Sabotage," I repeated, stunned. "By who?" He didn't answer, just looked down the hall where faint shadows moved beyond the emergency lights. Then he said something that froze me. "Stay behind me, Doctor." No matter what happens. Doctor. He only called me that when he was scared. The next minutes were chaos. The ship trembled as panels exploded in showers of sparks. The smell of burnt circuits filled the air. Cale fought like a storm, his plasma pistol flashing blue fire, his movements impossibly fast. And I, terrified but stubborn, stayed close. When the final intruder fell, I saw something I never expected. Cale bleeding. A deep gash ran across his shoulder, glowing faintly from the alien burn. He pressed a hand to it but said nothing, even as blood soaked through his uniform. Sit down, I said, grabbing the medkit. I can manage. Sit down. For once, he listened. As I sealed the wound with a dermal patch, I caught his gaze, not the cold, unreadable stare of a captain, but the fragile, flickering look of a man too tired to keep pretending. You could have died, I whispered. He looked away. Death is easier than what I feel now. I froze. What you feel? His lips pressed into a hard line. Every rule I've built my life on, I've broken it because of you. I swallowed hard. Then maybe it's time you stopped living by their rules. He laughed, bitter and low. You don't understand. If the fleet finds out, they'll strip me of command. Or worse. Worse than living like a ghost? I asked quietly. He didn't answer. But his hand reached for mine, slow and uncertain, like he was touching something sacred. That night, I stayed in his quarters again, not out of desire, but out of fear that he'd break apart alone. He sat by the window, bandaged shoulder bare, staring out at the drifting galaxies. You want to know why I joined the fleet? He said suddenly. Tell me. He exhaled slowly. Because I believed in order, in purpose. After the War of the Twin Suns, I needed structure, something to drown the chaos. He paused. But I didn't realize that structure would cost me my soul. I sat beside him. You don't have to keep paying that price. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that hurts to look at. And what will you do, Earthborn? Save me? If that's what it takes, I said softly. His eyes met mine. For a heartbeat, the whole universe seemed to hold still. You already are. Morning came with silence, the kind that feels too heavy to be real. The sabotage investigation began. Whispers ran through the corridors. Some said the captain's decisions were clouded. Others mentioned unauthorized emotional influence. I didn't need to guess who they were talking about. Cale called an emergency meeting. The officers lined up in the command hall, rows of alien faces, cold and disciplined. I stood in the back, trying not to tremble. When Cale entered, every voice fell silent. His wound was healed, his expression carved from stone. Someone within this ship betrayed us, he said. And until I find who, trust no one. His gaze flicked for a second to me. Then he turned away. After the meeting, I found him alone in the engine bay. Why didn't you tell them about me? I asked quietly. Because if they knew how much you mean to me, you'd already be dead. I stepped closer. Cale, he spun around suddenly, gripping my shoulders. Do you think this is a game? You're a human among soldiers trained to kill without hesitation. You think they'll let us exist? I met his eyes. Then let's give them a reason. What? Let them see that love isn't weakness. He stared at me like I'd said something impossible. Then softer, you're naive. Maybe, I whispered, but I've seen more healing in one touch than in 1,000 laws. He hesitated. Then his forehead rested against mine. You don't belong here, he murmured. Maybe I belong with you. His breath caught, and for a moment, his heart beat against mine like the echo of a collapsing star. Days passed in a blur of tension and quiet longing. Cale buried himself in command reports. I spent hours in the psychology lab, pretending not to feel his absence like a physical wound. Until one night, the door slid open, and Cale stepped inside. No uniform, no weapons, just a man, exhausted and undone. He didn't speak. He just sat down across from me and said, I can't do this anymore. My heart dropped. Do what? Pretend you don't exist in my every thought. I froze. I've fought empires, he said, voice shaking. But I can't fight this. Then he reached across the table and took my hand. Tell me what to do. I could have said anything to stop, to run, to hide. But instead, I whispered, let it happen. And for the first time, Cale Draven, the cold, unshakable captain, let himself fall. He kissed me like it was an act of surrender. Not violent this time, but slow, reverent, full of the ache of years he'd spent denying himself joy. When we broke apart, he whispered, if the stars burn out tonight, I'll die knowing I finally lived. But fate has a cruel sense of timing. The very next day, the fleet arrived. A colossal warship, the Zenith Command, appeared out of hyperspace. They hailed Cale's ship, ordering immediate compliance. The crew panicked. Cale stood silent, unreadable, as the holographic image of Admiral Tyron, his superior, flickered to life on the bridge. Captain Draven, the Admiral said coldly, you've been accused of emotional corruption. Is it true you've compromised your mission with a human subject? The bridge went silent. My heart stopped. Cale's gaze flicked toward me just once, brief and devastating, before he faced the hologram again. No, he said flatly. The lie hit me harder than any bullet. Tyron nodded. Then you'll surrender the human for questioning. Cale's hand tightened on the console. He's under my protection. That protection ends now, Captain. And just like that, the connection cut. Chaos erupted. The crew split, some loyal to Cale, others to the fleet. He ordered the ship into silent drift, shutting down all comms. I found him later in the strategy room, staring at a star map. His jaw was tight, his eyes burning with something between fury and despair. You lied for me, I said quietly. He didn't look up. It was the only way to buy time. For what? He turned then, stepping close enough that his voice dropped to a whisper. To get you out of here. My chest went cold. No, yes, he said sharply. They'll hunt you, torture you for information. I can't let that happen. Cale, you can't fight the entire fleet. He smiled bitterly. Watch me. We argued for hours. I told him I'd rather die with him than live running. He told me he'd burn every star in the galaxy before he let that happen. Finally, he slammed his hand against the console. You think this is romance, Doctor? It's survival. I don't care what happens to me. But you still have a life to live. My throat tightened. My life is here. With you. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he pulled me into his arms so suddenly, it stole my breath. His voice was barely a whisper. If I could rewrite the stars, I would make a world where we weren't enemies to our own hearts. I buried my face in his chest. Then let's make one ourselves. He didn't answer, but I felt the tremor in his hands. Later that night, Cale initiated what he called Protocol Ecliptic, a classified plan to hide from the fleet in the rings of a dead planet. As the ship descended into the glowing dust clouds, the crew muttered prayers, curses, and fears. Cale remained calm, his eyes locked on the stars. But when the ship stabilized, he finally looked at me and said, whatever happens next, promise me you'll live. Only if you do too. He smiled soft, sad. That's not how this ends. And something in his tone made me shiver. That night, as the crew slept in uneasy silence, I found Cale on the deck again, standing before the galaxy. You're planning something, I said quietly. He didn't turn. If I give them you, the crew lives. My heart stopped. No, he looked at me, eyes filled with unbearable sorrow. It's the only way. I stepped forward, grabbing his arm. You're not trading yourself for me. Not again. He cupped my face, thumb brushing away the tears I hadn't realized were falling. I never asked for redemption, but you made me believe I could deserve it. Then don't throw it away. He smiled faintly. I'm not. I'm giving it to you. Before I could speak, he leaned in a soft kiss, final and trembling, then whispered against my lips, forgive me. The words felt like a goodbye. The next morning, the alarms screamed again. Only this time, it wasn't sabotage. It was the fleet. Through the observation window, the Zenith Command's warships stretched across the void, endless, merciless. their lights glinting like 1,000 cold eyes. Cale stood on the bridge, calm as ever. But I could see it, the tremor in his hands, the tightness in his jaw. He was terrified. Not for himself. For me. "Prepare the jump drive," his second-in-command said. Cale shook his head. "No. They'd track us. We can't outrun them." "Then what do we do?" I asked, stepping forward. He turned to me, voice steady but hollow. "We surrender." The words punched the air out of my chest. "No. Cale, no." He faced me, his eyes soft, pained. "If we fight, they'll slaughter the crew. This is the only way to save them." "And what about you?" He smiled faintly. "I was never meant to be saved." Before I could answer, the communication panel flashed. Admiral Tyron's voice filled the bridge again. "Captain Draven, you are ordered to stand down and release the human." Cale's jaw clenched. "Understood." He turned away from the hologram and looked at me for a long, silent moment, 1,000 words in one gaze. Then he said, barely above a whisper, "Trust me." Minutes later, I found myself locked in an escape pod. "Cale," I shouted, pounding on the glass. "What are you doing?" His voice came through the com-com. Controlled. Breaking. "I told you I'd protect you, Doctor. This is how." "Don't you dare," the pod hissed. The lights blinked red. The clamps released. "Cale," I screamed. "Don't you." The stars blurred as the pod launched away from the ship, spinning into the vastness of space. Through the viewport, I saw his ship, the Zenith Star, drifting toward the enemy fleet. Lights dimmed, engines burning like dying embers. And then I saw him, Cale Draven, standing tall at the bridge window, watching me fade into the distance. The comm crackled one last time. "Remember what you taught me," his voice said softly. "That love isn't weakness. It's the reason we survive." Then the line went dead. The fleet surrounded his ship within minutes. I watched helplessly from the pod, silent tears streaking my face as the Zenith Star glowed brighter, too bright, and then vanished in a burst of white light. No explosion. No debris. Just gone. The shockwave hit seconds later, shaking the pod until everything went dark. When I woke up, I was in a med bay, Earth's med bay. They said I'd been found adrift near the Mars colony route, unconscious for 3 days. No record of the Zenith fleet. No sign of Cale. To the world, it was a miracle survival story. To me, it was the end of everything. I told no one what happened. Who would believe me? That I'd fallen in love with an alien commander who'd destroyed his own ship to save me? Weeks passed. The world went back to normal. I went back to work. But every time I looked at the stars, my chest burned. Every night, I dreamed of him, his voice, his touch, the way he said my name like it was something precious. Then, one evening, I found something strange. A signal. It came through my home terminal, encoded in a format I'd never seen. A faint hum, then static, and then a single line of text appeared on the screen. Protocol ecliptic complete. Coordinates attached. My heart stopped. It was him. It had to be. I didn't think. I just went. 3 days later, I was standing on a barren moon orbiting Titan, the air freezing even through my suit. The coordinates led me to a crash site, what was left of a small craft half buried in the dust. My breath caught. The metal was scorched, marked with a symbol I knew too well, the emblem of the Zenith fleet. Inside the wreckage, the air was thin, lights flickering. And then I saw him, Cale, alive. He was leaning against the console, bruised, pale, his once silver uniform torn. His eyes flicked up weakly when he heard me. "I told you to stay safe," he murmured. I choked out a laugh, half a sob. "You have no idea how bad I am at following orders." He smiled, a real one this time. Soft. Warm. "I destroyed the command vessel," he said quietly. "Used a warp charge to fake the explosion. They think we're both dead." I knelt beside him, shaking. "You insane, beautiful man." He chuckled weakly. "You said love wasn't weakness. So I proved it." My hands trembled as I touched his face. "You almost proved it to death. I had to make sure you lived," he whispered. "You're the only part of me that still feels human." Tears spilled down my face. And you're the only part of me that feels alive. I kissed him then gently, reverently, as if he might vanish again. His lips were cold, but his heartbeat was real beneath my hand. I found you, I whispered. You always will, he said, smiling faintly. We stayed hidden for months on that desolate moon, fixing what was left of the ship, surviving on rations and stolen starlight. Sometimes he'd wake up shaking, haunted by ghosts of the past. Sometimes I'd wake from nightmares of losing him again. But we had each other, and for the first time, neither of us ran from that truth. One night, as we sat under the glass dome watching Saturn's rings shimmer in silence, Cale reached for my hand. I used to believe the stars were endless, he said softly, that they meant freedom. And now, I asked, now I think freedom is wherever you are. I smiled through tears. That's the cheesiest thing you've ever said. He laughed a low, beautiful sound I never thought I'd hear again. You taught me that too. We sat there for hours, wrapped in the quiet hum of the universe. Two souls, one human, one alien bound by something far greater than either of us could explain. Months turned into a year. We built a home in the wreck, small, fragile, but ours. Cale's body healed. His eyes softened. Mine stopped searching the stars for ghosts. Every so often, we'd hear rumors of the fleet searching, still hunting shadows. But they never found us. We became myth. A ghost story whispered among galaxies, the captain who disobeyed command for love, and the human who taught him to feel. On our first anniversary, if you could call it that, Cale brought me to the cliffside of the moon where the sky shimmered violet at dusk. He held something in his hand, a small, glowing crystal. It's from my world, he said. It carries memories. He pressed it to my palm. Now it carries us. The crystal pulsed faintly, warm, alive. When I looked inside it, I saw flickers of moments. His first smile, the kiss on the bridge, the last goodbye before the explosion. All of it stored like light. I looked up, tears stinging my eyes. It's beautiful, he smiled. So are you. Then he added, with that quiet intensity that always undid me. If the stars ever fade again, look for this light. It will bring you back to me. I kissed him, and the galaxy burned around us. Years later, they say there are strange lights sometimes near the rings of Saturn, flashes of blue and silver, moving like dancing stars. Astronomers call them anomalies. But I know better, because every time I look through my telescope, I swear I can see him standing there, tall, proud, unyielding, watching me from the dark. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I hear his voice whispering through the static of memory. You were never abducted, doctor. You were found. Now I work quietly on Earth, teaching trauma therapy at a small university. The world still thinks I was just a lucky survivor. But every night, before I sleep, I hold that small glowing crystal close to my chest, our memory, our secret universe. It still hums faintly, a heartbeat of light that never fades. And when the stars align just right, I feel him again, not in the sky, but here, inside the fragile pulse of my own heart. Because some loves don't end. They just change constellations. He found me in darkness. I gave him back his humanity. And together, somewhere out there beyond the edge of known space, we made a new world, where love was no longer forbidden. Where the cold captain of the Zenith fleet finally learned to dream again. And I, the human he once abducted, became the only home he ever needed. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.